So much. My name is Mandy Lea, and I know there are a lot of really cool things going on at CES right now. So I want to thank you guys for taking a minute out of your day to see me. I like to pretend in my head that I'm the coolest thing going on right now, so you guys are in the best spot. I hope that with my talk today, I'm not going to be shooting live. Obviously, I don't have a landscape up here. So all I can do is share with you my story. So whether you're a professional photographer, an amateur, or even if you've never picked up a camera before, my stories can relate to the human being in all of us. So hopefully something in my stories can relate to you in some way. So why am I up here? This is me. My name is Mandy Lea. I'm a girl living in a teardrop trailer, and I like to take pictures. That's pretty much the essence of who I am and what I stand for. I consider myself to be a relatively average person. I didn't grow up with any super extraordinary circumstances, and I think I'm a pretty decent photographer, but I'm not really excelling in anything super amazing. I find myself to be just like every other person. So what makes me different is that I chased something beyond the American dream. So I'm going to give you guys the cliff notes of Mandy's American dream. This is what happened. Really quickly, I grew up in an amazing family in an amazing town with an amazing childhood. My parents took me camping for vacations. I learned at a very young age to love the outdoors. But I was very content just sitting in the camp pot. I didn't know at that time that love for the outdoors was later going to change the path that I chose in life. I went to high school. I went to college. I got a college degree. That's what we all do, right? I moved to the big city. I moved to Austin, Texas. I got married. I started a life. I started a career. And a career in photography, which is what I really wanted to do. And I was doing like kind of okay at it. And then that's when my American dream, like so many other Americans, went south. I wasn't happy with what was supposed to make me happy. I got a divorce, and I became very depressed. And I thought that depression would pass, but it never did. I kept working in this job I loved. I worked in the photography field for years, and I loved it, and I never became happy. And I realized if I didn't change something, I was never going to be happy. That depression was going to last forever. So I went on vacation. I went to these mountains. These are the Grand Tetons, and this is an image I took. Literally, I didn't even pull it out of nowhere. This is the sunrise I watched the minute I realized that this is out there, and I have two choices. I can either keep doing life as I've been doing it. I can go to work knowing this and a million other spectacular views are out there, or I can go chase them, and I can go see those spectacular views. And when I put it that way, the choice was really clear. It wasn't a hard choice to make anymore. I couldn't keep living the way I was living. I had to get out. So I went back to Austin, and I bought a teardrop, because that's what people do, right? I bought this teardrop as a means of getting out to see those spectacular views that I knew were sitting out there unseen. And I quit my job. I started giving away all my belongings. And I make this sound really easy, like, oh, I just up and did this one day. This was a hard decision, and I was scared, the bad wordless. I really could, I was so scared when I did this. But I made this choice, and obstacles kept being thrown in front of me. As soon as I was about to leave for the road, this teardrop got stolen from me. It was my home, and it, along with everything in it, was gone. So at that point, I said, okay, well, I could quit, or I could get a new teardrop, and I could keep going, and that's what I did. So I persevered through a lot of obstacles that kept me from chasing my dream, and I left. I hit the road by myself, and this first year, I've now been on the road for almost 2 years, and this first year was really important to me in a lot of ways. First of all, personally, I was a social butterfly in Austin. I loved getting around. I had tons of friends. And when you throw a social butterfly into a room by herself, and she has to all of a sudden hang out with herself and get to know herself and like herself, that's really scary. I was the one person I didn't want to be friends with, and I had to. So I learned to like myself, and I learned who I was, and more importantly, this is the year my photography became what it was. And whether you're a photographer or a painter or an artist of any kind, when I was in Austin, I got to learn from some of the best instructors in the country. I was very lucky that I was in touch with some amazing instructors through the camera store I worked at. And they gave me the tools to take on the road. And when I finally got on the road by myself with no outside influence, and I could make whatever I wanted to make with those tools, that's when my photography grew. So during this first year is when my photography style became what it was, and I fell in love with what it was I loved about photography to begin with. So that was a really important year. But I was still alone. So when I was traveling and I met this traveling hobo living in his truck, I thought, you know what? This guy's kind of cool. And now most parents would say, Mandy, you just met like a homeless dude living in his truck. That's not what I saw. What I saw was somebody else who had a passion so great for life and for what they were doing that they were willing to sacrifice everything else to chase that passion. Now that wasn't photography. For him, that was the mountains and climbing and the wilderness. But it was the same idea. You don't need what society says you need to be happy. So when I found somebody else chasing their happiness, I invited him to come with me, and this is our home now. We live in this very tiny trailer. This trailer is, from tongue to hitch, it's probably about 15 feet, but the actual inside living space is probably like 6 feet by 9 feet or something. Pardon me. I am getting a cold today, so apologies. But it is this first year that made me learn what really makes me happy and what I need to chase. And that's when I came up with my mission statement. Hang on. Thank you. We all need a purpose in life. And mine is to show people things they don't normally get to see, to make them do things they wouldn't normally do. So I know not everybody gets to see the things I get to see and experience the things I get to experience.
From someone else, also.
Thank you. Oh, you guys are so kind. And so I want to share my experiences through my images to hopefully have at least a little bit of the impact that these scenes have had on me for them. All right, I'm going to have a cough drop, guys. It's that season. It is. Soothing. Okay. So a lot of times people ask me what life on the road is like. And I will tell them, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Everybody knows life in general is not all sunshine and rainbows, but it is mostly sunshine and rainbows. So I'm going to tell you guys some of the stories behind my images so that you can understand where I'm coming from with them. One of my most favorite things is very obvious about living on the road is freedom. So I don't have freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. Everybody's like, how do you decide where to go? It's like, well, I still have events. I still have people I need to see and things I need to do. But I now have the freedom to choose what jobs I take and what I'm going to do in between those jobs. And that freedom is amazing. And it's not just freedom, it's a mindset. So in November, super recently, like 6 weeks ago, Kendrick and I were on our way down to Florida to go to a tiny house festival. We had about a week to kill before we got to Florida, and I remembered hearing about this place called Driftwood Beach. I couldn't remember where it was, but I remembered it was on the East Coast somewhere. So I Google it, and I see it's on our way to Florida. We got nothing to do, and honestly, we didn't really feel like spending a week in Florida. So we decided to hit up this place called Driftwood Beach. We get there at sunset, and this is the sunset that we get to see. And we spent a couple hours shooting these long exposures of the water coming in and out, pardon me, of these trees. And it was absolutely amazing. It was one of the best sunsets we've ever seen. And I don't get to see the ocean very often. So when the sun set, we said, you know what, I'd really like to see the sun rise over the ocean. And because of the life we lead and the mindset we have, we decided, let's come back in the morning. So there's a campground nearby that we decided not to stay at because I do everything I can not to pay for campgrounds. We drove to a truck stop, we slept for a couple hours, and we woke up early the next morning, and we came back and we watched sunrise over Driftwood Beach. And it was absolutely amazing. And I never would have been able to do that had I not decided to live this life on the road. We also got to partake in my weekly tradition of Sunday mimosas on the beach. I like to include a lot of behind-the-scenes cell phone shots from my travels because it reminds you that every image you see, there's a person and an experience and feelings going on behind that image. And this one happened to be a very good moment, and so that's why I included this. Aside from freedom, another thing I really like is the ability to explore. And what I mean by this, it seems super general, but in my old life, I would have gone to the Grand Tetons, I would have gone to the Grand Canyon, I would have gone to Sequoia, the Northwest, and the Northeast. I would have visited all these places, but I would have done it as a tourist. And visiting somewhere as a tourist is not the same as visiting there as a human being who has time to really appreciate it. So now when I go somewhere, I hit the touristy spots because they're beautiful for a reason. Like, those are amazing things y'all should see. But then I take time to go further. I take time to see the things that are less seen, and I take time to see things in a season when they're not normally seen. So the Grand Tetons has always held a super inspirational part in my heart. So when I went there last August, I've always imagined what it would be like to stand on top of the Grand Teton. But it was a pipe dream in my head because you have to climb up that thing. Like, there's no way I can climb up that thing. Me, this girl who works at this desk in this office, no way. Until I met Kendrick. And Kendrick really helped to enhance this exploration in me. I really love to do it. So this is a shot I took in August. This is almost to the summit of the Grand Teton. We decided to climb it. You start before sunrise, so when you're about halfway up, the sun rises, and this is one of the most memorable, one of the most glorious sunrises I have ever seen, and I will never forget the way I felt. I will never forget how cold it was, and I will never forget how we continued up to hit the summit, and a snowstorm hit. And this is one thing I've wanted my whole life, not my whole life, but since I've seen the Tetons. And a snowstorm hit, and we had to turn around. And that was one of the saddest moments of my life. But from that trip, I took this image. And if this image is all I bring back with me, that's enough because it reminds me of the entire experience. Now, Kendrick and I are very persistent, so we went down, we rested for 2 days, we had a mimosa, no lie, and we went back up 2 days later, started from the bottom, and made it to the top. So that is one of my most favorite experiences, which had I not decided to leave and hit the road and live this life, I never would have made it to the top of the Teton, and I wouldn't have the images I have to remind me of it. Another set of mountains that is really inspirational to me is called the Maroon Bells in Colorado. These mountains are some of the most photographed mountains in Colorado. And especially in the summer and the fall, if you go there, you'll be surrounded by 400 of your closest photography friends, all trying to get the same shot, and they will be fighting for every inch of ground they can for their tripod, and pretty much enjoying everything except for the beautiful mountains that are right in front of them. So this image reminds me of that. And I love the mountains, but I didn't like the experience. So again, one thing that this life allows me to do is not think that snowshoeing 6.5 miles to get somewhere in the winter is so crazy. Snowshoeing was not even in my vocabulary in my old life. And now it's something I could completely normally say, hey, let's go snowshoeing up to the Maroon Bells in the winter. And I get those mountains all to myself. I get the solitude, I get the silence, I get the beauty and the majesty of those mountains all to myself. And that is what my images are really about, is bringing that experience to you. So when you see one of my images, that's what I hope people feel. And the last thing that I really enjoy about living on the road is something that before I left, I really couldn't imagine. About a year or so into my traveling, I started to look back at all of the places I had taken myself. And I say that really purposefully, the places I took myself. I didn't just end up there, I went there. And I went to all these places and I'm like, man, that is a pretty cool life, Mandy. That's pretty amazing. And the perspective I thought about was, in my old life, how long would it have taken me to do all the things I did in this last year? Probably at least 10 years. By pursuing the things I pursue, I get to see some of the most beautiful mountains that I've ever seen. I get to go into some of the best canyons I've ever been in. I get to see some of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen in my life. And I get to go on hikes through the middle of a river and think that's a totally normal Tuesday. And that's something that, if I didn't face that fear of giving up stability of my normal job, I would never be able to do. And so when I look back at my year and I realize most people don't get to do what I do in a lifetime, I knew I made the right choice. But, like I said before, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So there are some negative things about this life. It's not super easy. But I'm not going to focus on it. I'm only going to give you guys one bad story, and I'm going to go super quick. This is the coral pink sand dunes in Utah. And it's just a pretty typical sand dune. But when I look at this picture, I remember this is Utah. This is in November, and this is one of the very first trips I ever took my teardrop on. And I was camping by myself, and I decided, I'm going to camp at the sand dunes. Woo! I'm like 50 miles away from anybody, any civilization. There's nobody at the campground because it's November. And what you can't see in this picture is that there's actually quite a bit of snow around. So I get up at about 4 a.m. because I have to use the restroom. And there's actually a little restroom at this place. So I get on my teardrop, I go to the restroom, I come back, and I can't open the door. And I think, what the heck? You can't lock this deadbolt without the key from the outside. But the only thing to this day I can guess that's happened is that I shut the door so hard that the deadbolt must have jimmied just enough shut that I couldn't open it. I couldn't get in my teardrop. I couldn't get in my car. I had no cell phone. And even if I did, I had no cell phone service, so who cares? There's no one else camping at this campground. And the nearest town is 50 miles away. And it's 4 a.m., and the sun does not rise until 7 a.m. That was one of the lowest moments of my entire journey. And there's a whole long story about how I get out of it, but obviously I survived. I'm here today, so that's the good news. But I learned a lot about myself that day. But what I really learned a lot about was loneliness. We all have phones these days, but I don't know if you guys have ever stood and tried to wait for something for 5 hours with no phone, no nothing, just you. I stacked rocks for like 4 hours. I did. But I got out of it, and I learned a lot about myself and a lot about loneliness. Aside from that, while I live a very unconventional life, I still have one foot in reality, which means I still have to work. I still need a job. I still have to make a little bit of money because I still have bills. I have an internet bill. I have a phone bill. I have a gas bill, and I have to eat. So one of the other hard things has been having the self-discipline to work on the road consistently and having the space to do so. This is the inside of our home, and while it is, I admit, completely adorable, it is also super tiny. It is probably smaller than this stage. Absolutely, smaller than this stage. This is the living room, the bedroom, the kitchen, the dining room, and my office. So finding time to keep it clean, keep it tidy, and work is not easy. This is a view looking the other way. I am 5'3". I'm super short. Kendrick is 6 feet tall, so you can imagine the two of us trying to live in this thing. You give up a lot of creature comforts. We made the decision to not have a bathroom. We made the decision, I say that again, not to have a bathroom. We don't have a lot of things. We gave up the majority of our clothes. And any hobby that takes anything you have to store at all, we can't do. But what it also does is it makes you prioritize what's really important to you. And I can tell you that all of the hardships of living this life are completely and 100% worth it. So, if you know me very well at all, you know that one of my biggest pet peeves, because I say this all the time, is when people I meet come up and see how I live, and they go, "Oh my gosh, your life is so amazing. You are so lucky." And I say, "Oh my gosh. No, this is wrong for 2 reasons. One, my life isn't quite as glorious as everybody thinks. Like, it's actually kind of a lot of work, but I love it. It's worth it. And 2, I had to face a lot of pretty serious fears to get where I am, and I had to give up a lot of things. And that to me is not luck, that's guts. But the good thing about it not being luck is that you guys can do it too. Anyone can do it. You don't have to win the lottery to live a happy life. You don't have to win the lottery to live a happy life. Whether you're a photographer, or you want to live on the road, or whether you want to be the president of the biggest law firm in the city, here's what you have to do. First of all, believe in yourself. This sounds super cliche, but seriously, the best advice I have. When I first hit the road, everybody told me, Mandy, how are you going to make money? And what are you going to do in 3 months when you fail? I know, I have great friends, right? Like, that's what they asked me. And I said, no. First of all, I don't know how I'm going to make money, but I'm going to. And second of all, I'm not going to fail because there is no plan B. There is no fail-safe to this life. This is the life I want. I'm going to make it happen, period. And I promise you, none of my friends believed me. And after I was on the road for a year, they were like, "What are you doing, Mandy? When are you quitting?" You know what? I'm going to do this as long as it makes me happy. And I don't know why, but I just had this belief that I wasn't going to fail. And that's all it took to get over that initial roadblock of, oh my gosh, am I seriously quitting my job? Number 2, give yourself credit. This is one of the hardest things I had to deal with when I first hit the road. It's been 3 months and I haven't made a single penny. Okay, Mandy, oh my gosh, you're a failure, right? No. I had to look at the little things. And it sounds super cliche, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And neither were you, and neither was your life, neither was your dream, and neither was your happiness. So I started to look at the little things. Oh my gosh, Mandy, you learned to hook up a trailer. You learned to turn a trailer around when you're stuck in the mud. You learned to get yourself out of being locked out of your trailer. You've learned a lot of things. You come a long way, and you're taking some of the best images of your life. Give yourself credit for the little things. Someday, it's going to come back around to you. Take chances. This is another thing I really had to deal with. I was always afraid of the word no, and me putting myself out there and people saying no. And we all do this, whether it's in photography or whatever business you're in. You quote people a quote that is just enough that you'll do it, but low enough that you think they'll say yes. Don't do that. Your quote should be whatever it is you think you're worth. And this happens to me still to this day. I always tell Kendrick, don't let me undervalue myself, because if somebody says no to me, great, I move on to the next person. Now, don't lie and say you're worth way more than you are, but don't undervalue yourself, because the worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say no. Work hard. Okay, this sounds like super obvious, right? But here's what I mean. We all obviously have to work hard in life. When I had a job, any day job I ever had, I would work hard. I was a hard worker. And all of that work, every single day, 9 to 5, it was like paying rent. It was like throwing that work away, and I was working to make somebody else's dream come true. I was working to make my boss's dreams come true. I was working for other companies. But I was willing to do it because that's what we do. Now I work 100 times harder than ever before. But all of that hard work is like buying my own house. It's all going to me. It's all making me a better person. So I'm like the worst boss ever. I will work 24 hours a day. If I'm ever sitting down watching a movie not working, I feel guilty. And I know that's terrible. But that's what you have to do to make your own dreams come true. And it's okay, because you're working for you. And the last thing to be happy and to follow your dreams is to define success. This is probably the idea that has been, this is the single biggest epiphany I ever had on the road. I felt like I was a failure on the road after several months because I didn't have a big following as other photographers. I wasn't making a ton of money. I wasn't booking gigs and workshops and all this stuff. And then I realized that society has this really, really terrible thing where we equate success to money. And it's not. And I can't tell you how cliche this sounds, but money doesn't make us happy. And so when I realized that not making money wasn't being a failure, I realized, okay, what does make me happy? Traveling makes me happy. Filling my memory bank and filling my adventure bank makes me happy. Experiencing things in life makes me happy. And looking back on my life and being able to recount the things I've done and the people I've met makes me happy. And when I defined happiness as success, that's when I decided I'm truly successful on the road. As long as I can pay my bills, buy myself food to eat, not be a leech on society, and still be happy, I'm successful, right? So if you're in your job and if you are making 6 figures or 7 figures a year, but you're not happy, ask yourself if you're successful. Because in my mind, that's not success. But what I've chosen to do in my life is. And I hope that through my images, and when people look at my images, they see a pretty picture that makes them happy and warm and fuzzy inside. But I also hope that they see the person and the life and the experience that's going on behind the camera. Because those pictures aren't taken by a drone. They're not taken by a robot. They're taken by a human that has gone to a place to take a photo, to experience and bring that experience to you guys. And that's what I hope to do. So you guys can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. I have a little video blog. If you didn't hear enough of my cold today, I'm sure I'll be sick for another week. And I can talk to you guys then. So thank y'all for listening to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, amazing program by Mandy Lea. Thank you so much, Mandy. Up next, we have the king of Hollywood, celebrity photography, Matthew Jordan Smith, here to talk to you about the work he has done with the Nikon D850 and 5 steps to success in photography. 4 o'clock right here at the Nikon Theater, live streamed as well. Matthew Jordan Smith.